The story I'm about to tell is a terrifying experience that happened to me, my younger brother, and my mom. I've been meaning to share this story for the past 2 to 3 years, but due to busy schedules and other reasons, I never got around to it. Today, despite being swamped, I decided to write it down. If you enjoy it, please let me know, it would make me very happy. Without further ado, let me dive straight into the story. This incident happened to us in 2017. At the time, I was in my second year of community college, and my younger brother was in 8th grade. My mom was a homemaker, and my dad was working overseas in Dubai. We had always lived in Chicago, but we didn't own a house. We rented an apartment in the Lincoln Park area. For some reason, which I'd rather not get into, we had to move out of that apartment, catering to a place in the Pilsen neighborhood. Looking back, moving into that apartment might have been one of the biggest mistakes of our lives. The building was very old, arguably the oldest in the area. It was a 4-story building with a 5th floor attic that had been converted into a living space. That's where we rented a room. There was no proper staircase to access our room. We had to use a separate ladder to get up there. When we first moved in, I noticed how filthy the rooms were. We had moved apartments before, but I had never seen anything this dirty. It felt like the rooms had been abandoned for years. The rent was incredibly cheap, which is why my mom chose it. The place was covered in cobwebs, and as soon as we stepped inside, we were hit with a foul, rotting smell. We thought maybe a rat had died somewhere. Anyway, we cleaned up as best as we could and arranged our furniture. That day, we were so exhausted that we just went to sleep. My younger brother and I spent most of our time outside at school, college, and extracurricular activities. My mom stayed home alone most of the day, and with my dad away, she had to handle most things on her own. About 3 or 4 days after moving in, my mom asked me one evening, "Do you hear a baby crying at night, like a 5 or 6-month-old baby?" I said, "No, I haven't heard anything like that," she replied. "Well, tonight I'll make sure you hear it. Every night, I hear a baby crying from the attic." Before I go further, let me describe the apartment a bit, so it's easier to understand. It was a 2-bedroom apartment. As soon as you entered through the main door, there was one room, then a small living room, and then another room. My mom, my younger brother, and I stayed in the inner room. The main door room was mostly unused. My mom's room had an attached bathroom and kitchen. That night, around 2:30 or 3 a.m., my mom came into our room and woke me up. She said, "Come to our room, quickly." My younger brother was still asleep. I followed her to her room. She whispered, "Do you hear it? Do you hear it? A baby is crying." I listened carefully and clearly heard the sound of a baby crying, coming from the attic. My heart skipped a beat. I thought maybe my mom was mistaken, but hearing it with my own ears scared me. The crying wasn't loud, but it wasn't faint either. It felt like the crying was meant for us. It was a haunting, sorrowful cry, as if someone was in immense pain. This went on for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then it stopped abruptly. I told my mom, "Who's crying? Let's not pay attention to this. Let's just go back to sleep." I returned to my room and fell asleep. The baby's cries happened every night at the same time. My mom, my brother, and I all heard it, but we didn't give it much importance. It became a normal part of our lives. A few days later, the crying stopped, but we started hearing the sound of anklets jingling from the attic. It sounded like someone was running from one corner of the attic to the other barefoot. The sound was unmistakable. This made us all a bit uneasy, and fear started creeping into our minds. After 2 or 3 days of hearing these sounds, my mom asked the building's superintendent, who lived here before us. He said, "I just started working here a few months ago. The place has been empty since I joined." My mom spoke to a few other tenants, but no one seemed to know anything about it. She didn't push further and let it go. It's worth mentioning that the landlord didn't live on the property. They had another house in the suburbs and only came by once a month to collect rent. A couple of days later, my mom noticed something strange. While cooking in the kitchen, she would hear someone whispering close to her ear. The same thing happened when she was doing laundry in the bathroom. The small spice jars on the kitchen shelf would occasionally fall for no reason. My mom started feeling like someone was always watching her, following her around. The bathroom light would fuse without any apparent cause. Whenever I came home, she would tell me everything. I'd tell her, just pray and read the Bible, everything will be fine. On the 10th night after we moved in, something terrifying happened. My younger brother suddenly woke up screaming. His scream jolted me awake, and I turned on the light. My mom rushed into our room from hers. My brother's eyes were wide with fear. I asked him, "What happened?" He said, "I woke up suddenly and went to the bathroom. When I came back to the room, I smelled something rotten. I was still half asleep, so I lay down. Then I heard something breathing heavily, like someone growling in anger. I looked toward the main door and saw a dark, shadowy figure of a woman standing there. In the dim light from the window, I could see her clearly. Her body was pitch black, her hair was disheveled, and her eyes were glowing like a cat's. She looked furious, staring right at me. Suddenly, she started moving toward me. I closed my eyes and screamed. Hearing this made my fear multiply 100 times. I started feeling like there was something seriously wrong with the apartment. My mom recited some prayers and blew on my brother to calm him down. The next day, I told my mom, "I don't feel comfortable living here anymore. I really don't want to stay," she said. "Look, moving again right now would cost a lot of money. Let's trust in God. Everything will be fine. Don't worry." On the 13th day, we were invited to a relative's house for dinner. We stayed out late and came back exhausted. Everyone went to sleep, but I stayed up. I was standing by the window in my room, talking to a friend on the phone. From my window, I could see part of the attic. My attention was fully on the phone call when suddenly, a cold breeze brushed past me. My eyes instinctively went to the attic, and what I saw was beyond anything I could have imagined. I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw a dark, shadowy figure of a woman holding a baby, standing in the attic. The spot where she stood was impossible for a normal person to reach. Seeing her there filled me with dread. She was staring directly at me, tilting her head from side to side. Her smile was grotesque, and black liquid dripped from her mouth. It was a horrifying sight, one I can't fully describe. I was so terrified that I couldn't move. My entire body felt paralyzed, as if some evil force had taken control of me. The woman kept tilting her head and smiling, and I couldn't look away. Meanwhile, my friend on the phone kept saying, "Hello, hello," but I couldn't speak or move. I felt like I was losing my breath. In my mind, I started praying to God. With all my strength, I screamed for my mom and then passed out. When I regained consciousness, I saw everyone gathered around me. My mom said, "Your moaning woke up your brother. You were standing by the window with the phone to your ear, moaning and shaking. When your brother touched you, you fainted. He called me, and I found you like this." The next morning, my grandparents and cousins were called over. I told my mom everything that had happened that night. I also called the friend I was talking to on the phone. He said, "You suddenly went silent, and then I heard some strange noises. I thought it was a network issue, so I hung up and went to sleep." After that, we contacted the local church pastor and explained everything that had been happening. He agreed to visit our apartment. That evening, after the service, he came over. He prayed for us and sprinkled holy water around the apartment. Before leaving, he said, "You're not alone here. There's a presence in this house, and it doesn't want you here. Organize a prayer gathering, have the Bible read aloud, and feed the poor. Hopefully, things will get better." We followed his advice, and for a while, it felt like the weight had lifted off our shoulders. We thought the ordeal was over, but little did we know, something even worse was waiting for us. Everything seemed normal for a while. No more baby cries, no more jingling sounds. The fear in our hearts had almost disappeared. On the 28th night, after moving in, I was asleep when I felt someone shaking me and calling, "Sam, wake up." I rubbed my eyes and saw my mom standing over me, shaking me. Her eyes were wide, her hair was a mess, and she was drenched in sweat. Her hands and legs were trembling. I quickly turned on the light. She looked like she had just been through a battle. I asked, "What happened, Mom? Why are you like this?" In a trembling voice, she said, "There's a shadow in my room. I've been calling you for so long, but you didn't hear me." I was screaming, but no one came. The shadow scratched me with its nails. It was clear that my mom had faced something horrifying. Hearing her and seeing her like this made me more determined than afraid. Tears welled up in my eyes. I thought to myself, if I could just touch or grab this thing, I would fight it. I was filled with an indescribable determination. I went to my mom's room with my brother. It was completely silent. The most shocking thing was the scratch marks on my mom's hands. It looked like someone with sharp nails had clawed her. Both her hands had marks. Then I noticed that her window was slightly open. I closed it. None of us could sleep that night. The next morning, we decided we couldn't stay in that apartment any longer. We contacted the landlord and requested an urgent meeting. On the 29th evening, the landlord came over and my mom explained everything that had happened. My brother and I were outside at the time. We showed the landlord the scratch marks. At first, the landlord tried to avoid the topic, but my mom insisted. Finally, the landlord revealed the truth. I later heard everything from my mom. The landlord said, about 5 or 6 years ago, in 2011 or 2012, a family lived here, a husband, wife, and their infant child. The husband was a terrible man. He abused his wife, and everyone in the building knew about it. Eventually, the wife had a mental breakdown. One day, after another violent argument, the husband left and never returned. A week or so passed, and no one came in or out of the apartment. The whole building started smelling of rot. When the super broke down the door, they found the wife's body hanging and the baby's lifeless body on the bed. The police were called, and the bodies were removed. The place was left vacant for over a year. After that, I tried renting it out, but no one stayed for more than a week. I even had priests come and bless the place, but nothing worked. The apartment stayed empty for 2 years until you moved in. The room you're staying in is where she died. My mom told the landlord, "We're moving out tomorrow." On the 30th morning, my mom and I went apartment hunting. By the grace of God, we found a decent place and moved out the same day. After dropping my mom off at the new place, my brother and I went back to get the rest of our belongings. As we drove away, I looked back at the building. Through the window of our old room, I thought I saw the shadowy figure of the woman holding the baby. I felt a pang of sadness for her. Every incident has a reason behind it, and history always finds a way to reveal itself. These things are hard to believe unless you experience them yourself. Only those who face such situations can truly understand the feeling. After leaving that apartment, by the grace of God, we never faced any such problems again. This was the story of the horrifying month we spent in that apartment. I hope you found it interesting. I have another strange story that happened to me in Dubai. I'll share that another time. Take care, stay safe, and God bless.